Good afternoon to you. Mark Sett with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Thursday, the 10th day of June, 2021. And as you can see from the graphic behind me, let me take me out of the way. We do have a little bit of stuff to talk about today. The possibility of some Gulf development may be coming up in the relative near future. So we'll discuss that as well as a couple of tweets from Ben Knoll, or at least one tweet from Ben that I want to take a look at. And we're going to talk about out west in the desert Southwest, some important things going on there regarding the weather. That'll be towards the end of the discussion, but it's a little bit more loaded today with a few more tabs. So let's start off with this look real quick at the tropical cyclone report for Hurricane Ada. You remember that one? That was the last landfall, thank goodness. Way back, doesn't seem like it was that far ago, really, because it was in November. And this thing made landfall in Nicaragua as a Category 4, and then it meandered around the Caribbean, finally coming out as a tropical storm, coming up into the Florida Keys area, and it before doing so, it pushed a storm surge down in Nicaragua of up to 33 feet there. That's, I mean, come on, that's getting it. That's bad. And let me just tell you something. That kind of surge is possible in the United States. We should know that. And we saw it in Katrina, where it was more than 25 feet. In a great deal of the Mississippi Sound area. This part of Nicaragua where Ada came in, very vulnerable to storm surge with the shallow shelf waters down there. And Ada was a fairly small system. The overall wind field was fairly small. In the United States, these systems tend to expand and their wind fields grow. And it's interesting because my team and I were up in, actually it ended up being Mike and myself in the Tampa-St. Pete area, when Ada made its way around and finally came up to that region to make landfall near Cedar Key as a tropical storm, it still put several feet of water, 3 to 4 feet or so, as they indicate there, in the Tampa Bay area, just from a tropical storm. So you bring a Cat 4, this definitely opened my eyes. What we saw in Nicaragua is absolutely possible in the United States from one of these large hurricanes that has a big wind field especially. So an interesting report, the last one of the year from the 31 total tropical cyclones that we had last year. And remember real quick, a tropical cyclone is a tropical depression, a tropical storm, or a hurricane. It's the all-encompassing definition. We call them tropical cyclones. Like, I think I got this right, we generally refer to a beagle or a dachshund, or a hound dog. I'm trying to think of dog. It's canines, right? German Shepherd, you call them Chihuahua, whatever. Those are different canines. Canine is the general term. Tropical cyclone is the general term. And so there were 31 tropical cyclones. 30 of them made it to tropical storm intensity or higher. And so 30 of them received a name. And we ended the reports here from the Hurricane Center. This is the 31st report. Yes, they did one on the one tropical depression that we had that never made it to name storm strength. If you want to read this, I'll put a link to it in the description of today's video. Very important, the work that they put in, all these different forecasters and scientists at the Hurricane Center. Sometimes our data will get put into these, as does the data from some of the other chasers that you may know, universities, companies like Weatherflow. It's good stuff, and they take a lot of effort to put these things together, so check it out if you have nothing else to do and you want to read a good technical report. Nothing like Ada out there right now, of course. There's not, because why? Well, because it's June, and it's not late October or November when the Western Caribbean typically sees those monster hurricanes. You can get some hurricane activity in June, but it's usually in this area, if it's going to happen at all, and most hurricanes in June are going to typically be larger, weaker overall on the Saffir-Simpson scale, but big rainmakers, and we're going to talk about that potential in just a moment. So a couple things to point out. First of all, strong southwesterly winds in the upper levels, interacting with a little bit of a surface trough down here, bringing some heavy rain in Puerto Rico and parts of the Virgin Islands. I heard from Brent and Carlos, a couple of our supporters and good friends of mine down there. Even Tim Olive in St. Thomas, his camera, we've got a live camera down there. Should have had it ready for you to show you. That's my fault. But trust me, it's been raining down there to beat the band today. Lots of heavy rain. even some street flooding in parts of Puerto Rico as this tropical moisture comes through, interacting with this little bit of a surface trough and an upper level low down there. It's kind of a hodgepodge of weather, but no hurricanes or anything like that. Nevertheless, you can still get some heavy rain just because you're down in the tropics. Meanwhile, over to the west, we have a large area of just general disturbed weather as a more favorable overall convective pattern sets up that's dueling with these strong upper level winds that are just cutting across the region. You know, it's still early. The westerlies are still prevalent, so you're going to have those cutting across. We start to lose that later on in the season after about mid-August. Most of the westerlies should retreat to the northern latitudes up here, leaving this area much more favorable. But in June, you got to find very small windows of opportunity for things to develop, and sometimes they do. Most of the times they don't, but sometimes they do. Shifting east just a little bit, a couple of interesting things to point out. Clearly there's a frontal boundary draped across the northwest Atlantic. There's those strong upper level winds that I was just talking about cutting across the Caribbean. And then, check this out, coming off Africa, large tropical wave area of convection. Then you've got the African dust that's out here. You can tell just looking at this milky color that I'm coloring in with yellow. So, there's a lot of activity out there, but nothing organizing into a tropical system of any type. Nothing seen over the next 2 days, nor the next 5 days. In the eastern Pacific, a little bit different story. A couple of medium chance development areas. This one closer to the Mexican coastline and Central America could bring some heavy rain, which is a problem. Don't ever discount heavy rain as being, that's nothing. Trust me, it can be something, and it can be lethal if you have too much of it at one time, especially when it runs downhill. But both these systems fairly slow in organizing, and you can tell even just looking at the vorticity, they're all stretched out down here. Everything is linear, not bundling up. There's some energy coming off Africa. Interesting to watch that. You'll be able to track these features as they move west across the Atlantic. A couple of just minor areas of vorticity showing up, barely registering. This is some energy up over the northern plains that'll create some severe weather. And if you're up there, I saw an incredible picture or two of a big stacked pancake supercell on Twitter yesterday that was just remarkable. I was like, oh man, I would have given $100 to see that as a time lapse, to see that thing rotating. Maybe somebody got that. But that's the energy, this vorticity that we talk about over the mid-latitudes and, like the upper plains there, the Great Plains in southern Canada and Alberta province, you can get supercells. The energy is different than what we see in the tropics. Down in the tropics, we're looking to see, does this energy become more circular and bundled up? And still, so far, we can put a big check mark out here. All is good. No bundling of the energy just yet. But we're going to be watching this area right through here over the next week or so. I think we're starting to see at least sort of an end game, if you will, of all of this talk that we've seen recently about the potential for development. Now, let me just do a little bit of not a lecture, but an observation. There we go. Social media, the access to long-term models more than 3 to 5 days out, and social media, all combined, make it so that the old expression of a watched pot never boils really comes to life here. That we're watching this stuff every day, every model cycle. We see these MJO pulses coming, or these convectively coupled Kelvin waves, just fancy meteorological terms to say a window of opportunity might be coming. We see these things coming weeks out. So there's just all this anticipation. It's kind of like hearing about your college football team, your favorite NFL team, your baseball team, your basketball team, whatever the case may be. In the off season or the preseason, they're loaded for bear, they're ready to go, and you just can't wait for the on season to get here in that sport. And it just seems like it takes forever for the games to start, and then how do they do during the season, and then how do they do if there are playoffs, that kind of thing. Seriously, sports and weather do have a connection here, and we can watch both very closely, almost like under a microscope all the time. And in the case of the weather, I mean, goodness, stuff updates. If you're looking at the HRRR, talking about severe weather, the high resolution rapid refresh, I think it is, the HUR, It's every hour it'll update. You know, that's amazing. And radar is every 6 minutes. So yes, there's a lot of watching the pot. And you want to know, is it going to boil? And if so, am I going to get any hot water on me? That's a good way to put it. That just kind of worked out, didn't it? So yes, we've been watching this area. And looking at the GFS, there's some evidence of this overall cyclonic gyre down here, but not much. A little bit of westerly winds coming in this way, turns back around that way. Otherwise, it's just generally southeast winds through here. Just not as robust as I was thinking it would be from the modeling. But let's see what happens. Let's move this out into time. This is the GFS, 850 millibars in the atmosphere. 24 hours out, 48. Yeah, still not much down there. Just a little bit of energy trying to come together. By day 3, a little bit more in the southern Gulf Bay of Campeche area. Day 4, you know, again, kind of the same thing. A little bit more of a signal of that CAG, that Central American gyre. A little bit. It's kind of twisted in there. Convoluted. It's not as defined as I'm used to seeing. But nevertheless, just enough of a disturbance down there and just the overall pattern that by day 5, day 6, we'll just cheat a little bit and look out into time more than I usually do. By day 7, this is what I'm talking about. There's the signal that this larger circulation pattern getting kind of tangled up down here in southeast Mexico might, and if I could underline the words coming out of my mouth, I would. See them flowing out like an After Effects effect. You know, you see the words coming out of my mouth. I would underline the word might. This might lead to the eventual development of low pressure in the Bay of Campeche or the southern Gulf of Mexico, you know, whatever, Southwest Gulf. Maybe. This is a week out, 168 hours out. But at least we're starting to see, it's a little closer into time. It's not 9, 10, 11 days. It's about a week out, 5, 6, 7 days, something like that. That's the window. And not only is it in the GFS, but it also shows up in the Euro. This is 24-hour increments. So here's 24, 48, 72, 96. And I mean, the Euro's got something down there in 4 days, a little weak system. 120, 144, 168. It, too, very similar to the GFS overall, showing some signature of low pressure, disturbed weather, huge rainmaker, whatever, energy in the Gulf of Mexico, Southwest Gulf. So yes, we got to watch this. This is a week out. Models are good. They're not perfect. This isn't going to be exactly what happens. There could be nothing there. There could be a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane down there. Seriously, both of those scenarios wouldn't surprise me at all. It's hurricane season, so why not? On the other hand, it's early in the hurricane season, so you ask, well, why? See how we're doing that? Why not, or why? You got to look in between and just say, hey, over the next week, we'll keep our eyes on this area. There is a little bit more agreement in the models to warrant more attention placed to it. And then look, the Euro even has this tropical wave coming through, a little bit of energy there moving through the windwards in about a week's time. Just something to watch as we go forward. So yes, we'll do that. We'll keep an eye on it. Gulf of Mexico water temperatures in the western Gulf. Warm enough, 28, 29 south, 27 or so north. Over the next several days, these will just increase with time. So, again, something to watch. See what happens. Don't worry about it. No reason to. Just be aware. I keep saying this, but I want to remind you because we don't want to alarm people and make you fearful because we fear what we don't understand. And just helping us to understand the pattern and so forth. A, we've seen this coming for several days, the potential anyway, and nothing's there yet. And B, if it does, we have plenty of time to react and just keep our cool about it, right? We use the science to our advantage. All right, looking out ahead. Speaking of the science and how we can sort of see into the future, I think it's just remarkable. Our good friend Ben Knoll tweeting some helpful information once again that over the next several weeks, a convective pulse will move across the Pacific into the Atlantic and Africa, and that could result in opportunities for development. That's the window coming. So let's put this into motion. This is where we are now. The way it cuts off in the corner there is a little annoying, but it's okay. If we put this into motion, this takes us out the next couple of weeks And all that green through June into early July, there's June 25th, there's July 2nd, and July 10th or so, I think. You can just see what happens. Over here, this convective area moves out of the Pacific there, and there, really filling the Atlantic with a more favorable pattern of less shear, a more moist environment overall, and the ability for Africa especially to generate tropical waves that would then come out and seed the Atlantic coming across, ending up maybe in the eastern Pacific later on, the southwest Atlantic, you never know. But the bottom line is this is what the modeling is showing. This is from the JMA, the Japanese model, and the Japanese Meteorological Agency, and what it's showing with this upward motion. Rising air is the green, sinking air is the reddish color, and just something interesting as we move forward, all right? So a more favorable time ahead. Here's what's not favorable. This is really bothersome, and I bring this up because it is related to the tropics a little bit. The Drought Monitor, which began, as the tweet says here, in the year 2000, has really shown us some disturbing and alarming trends as of late. That we're now at a record high drought out west. And, you know, there's a lot of weather and a lot of attention paid, weather enthusiasts for back east. You know, Tornado Alley and east into winter storms, you know, Florida, whatever. But remember, California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, the Pacific Northwest, that area, but really the desert Southwest as a whole, and parts of Southern Cal, very, very negatively impacted. Water levels low in the reservoirs, and this stuff is not being made up. It's not some agenda. It's not trying to whatever. It's so annoying when people, not everything is an agenda. You can just go look yourself. You can just fly or drive out there and go check out the Colorado River. I was back out there in April with my family, and I saw it. There's these burned out forests, the Kaibab Forest out there in Arizona. Areas outside of Phoenix burned last year. I saw it with my own eyes. I was out there last July. This is real. This is bad. And you got this widespread 95 plus temperature pattern coming along. Not good. So severe to unbelievable, like crazy, exceptional drought in some very important areas of our country. And it's interesting, as we just look ahead, you know, high temperatures rule the roost over the next 6 to 10 days. Hot, yuck, and very little precip chances. And you know what, though? This is the one case, this is where I tie it in. Hopefully the monsoon will kick in. We'll take a look at a little bit of a hint of that coming up maybe towards the end of the month into July. Or a tropical cyclone later in the season. I mean, really any time, but usually it's September into October when you get troughing out west. They could use one of those out there. The problem is you get a lot of rain all at once. But this is getting absurd, and the fire danger out there, the lack of water, this is a really, really big problem. And in this case, you could take a storm, a hurricane, and bring it up the Gulf of California or whatever, and bring some of that moisture into the desert Southwest, and they would gladly take it. One of the few times when you should be wishing for at least the moisture from a tropical cyclone out of the eastern Pacific for our good friends here in the desert Southwest, Northwest Mexico too. Don't want to leave them out. They're just as dry. It doesn't end at the border, all right? And looking at the GFS here for the desert Southwest, here's the Four Corners area of Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico. There's Nevada. Oh, I went too fast there. It is Utah right there. There's Colorado. There's New Mexico. And there's Arizona. I just got too excited about this whole thing. And excited as in I wanted to talk about this because I didn't want to neglect it. That I screwed up the Four Corners. How could I? Nevertheless, this is the GFS for that area. It's okay. And it's dry in the Four Corners and in Nevada and in California. And if we scoot this on out, there's 5 days out, no appreciable rain, maybe some high elevation precip. And then you scoot out into time further, and finally some higher elevation orographic lifting of some moisture. We're talking about 8, 9, 10 days out. That's about it. Just a real problem. And boy, you could use a system coming up the Gulf of California and the remnants coming up into this area, or maybe up towards Southern Cal, San Diego or something. Maybe September or October, we'll see. Sometimes in August you can get them. But just yuck. I mean, I'm hoping to go out there once the monsoon, if it comes, shows up, and talk about it. Do some reporting about it. It's a fascinating area of the country. There's a lot of history out there, Native American culture, all kinds of, the natural beauty, whatever. I'm just kind of drawn to it. And when they do get a tropical cyclone that comes up there, the remnants of it, it's often very dramatic. All right, so there you go. Hey, look, I ordered a few more of these because I sold out of the first batch. Got a good deal from Printing to get 50 more. So if you want to order one, I'm just impressed that people want a paper tracking map in the age of apps and online tracking. We have an incredible interactive tracking map ourselves on the HurricaneTrack Insider site. You can go to HurricaneTrack.com/trackmap. I'll put the link in the description. You can order one, $18 plus $4 flat rate shipping, and it comes in a nice, sturdy mailing tube so that I can roll the map. Remember from Twister? Roll the maps. I've said that before, but it's funny, and it's a great line from that movie. I roll them up, put them in these tubes, and it looks nice when you get it. So I got 50 more, and they're here. They have just arrived, and if you want to track on paper, check the link in the description of today's video. All right, that is it from me. Let me get out of here and get back to work on all kinds of other stuff. In the background here of the HurricaneTrack headquarters in Wilmington, North Carolina. As always, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate a little bit of your time each and every day. Don't forget, speaking of that, every morning, Hurricane Season, the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, it's on. It's an audio, 5 minutes or less usually, in contrast to this, which is much longer, and that's what this is for. The early morning podcast is kind of like a little digest of the day ahead, what I'm looking at, and then we go into great detail, just like we just did on this video every afternoon, at least most afternoons. Speaking of afternoons, have a good rest of your afternoon. I am Mark Sudduth. Again, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.